You are listening to Radio Maria Canada. We now present the Health Hub, hosted by Cathy Biase.
Welcome to the Health Hub on Radio Maria Canada, exploring cutting-edge health and wellness information and therapies, helping you to take your health to the next level. I'm your host, Cathy Biase, and I'm an holistic nutritionist and a professional cancer coach. Today on our show, we are venturing into the timeless science of Ayurveda and how its wisdom aligns with modern understandings of longevity, digestion, and breath. And my guest is Dr. John Douillard. Together we explore how diaphragmatic breathing, a cornerstone of both yoga and Ayurvedic practice, can profoundly influence digestion, stress resilience, and the aging process. Dr. Douillard shares how subtle practices like breath awareness and meal timing can optimize body's natural rhythms, balance the nervous system, and support graceful aging from the inside out. Dr. John Douillard is a well-known expert in Ayurveda and the founder of LifeSpa.com, a leading authority on evidence-based Ayurvedic healthcare. He has over 40 years of experience helping people achieve lasting health, vitality, and longevity. Dr. John's journey began in 1986 in India, after which he collaborated with Deepak Chopra to train doctors in Ayurvedic medicine. As a chiropractic and sports medicine specialist, he used Ayurvedic principles to improve athletic performance and worked with athletes like Billie Jean King. Dr. John has written 7 books and over 1,500 educational articles, empowering a global audience of more than 11 million to reverse aging and heal naturally. In this show, we really broaden our understanding of Ayurvedic medicine. We talk about Ayurveda and the ancient blueprint for longevity, why diaphragmatic breathing is a longevity practice, the importance of our diaphragm, and how over time it's become constricted, which leads to the aging process, or certainly adds to the aging process. We talk about bridging East and West for modern wellness. And whether you're new to Ayurveda or you're simply curious about how ancient wisdom meets modern physiology, this is a conversation that offers practical insights on cultivating longevity, improving your gut health, and living in harmony with your body's innate intelligence. So do stay tuned. We will be back in just a few minutes to speak with Dr. John Douillard.
You are listening to Radio Maria Canada. We now continue with the program, The Health Hub, hosted by Cathy Biase.
Welcome back, everybody. Please do follow us on our social sites. We are on Instagram, X, and Facebook, and we are at the Health Hub RMC on those locations. Dr. John, welcome to the show.
Cathy, good to be here. Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I think, personally within my own practice, I touch so basically on this area. And there's just so much to unpack here. I definitely won't get through most of it on the first show. But I think giving people an introduction to Ayurvedic medicine, we're going to pull longevity into the conversation. And I think as we talked a little bit off air, there are so many aspects of building this picture of longevity through Ayurvedic medicine. It's going to be a really interesting conversation. So welcome to the show, and let us know how you got into this whole area of Eastern medicine.
Wow, that's a good question. Going back into the early 1980s, I was training for an Ironman triathlon, and I heard that there was a lecture on yoga, Ayurveda, and breathing techniques, and I was like, wow. So I went, and afterwards I went up to the guy and I said, hey, I'm doing an Ironman. What does Ayurveda think about all this exercise? And he looked at me and said, well, what is it? And I told him it's a 2.5-mile swim, 112-mile bike, 26-mile run. And he looked at me and he said, why do you do that? And I really...
I'm looking at you saying, why do you do that?
I know. And no one ever asked me that before, so I didn't really have an answer. And he looked at me like I was sort of like an idiot. And I said, and then he said, do you meditate? And I said, I do meditate, actually. And he said, well, then do you sleep while you meditate? And I said, yeah, deeply. I get this really deep, knocked out, drag out sleep. And he said, meditation is different than sleep. Meditation is being resting, but being alert at the same time. You're not conked out. I was like, oh, gosh, that's not me. And he said, you're exhausted and you should probably not do all that exercise. And I was like, but what if I was able to not fall asleep in my meditation and also do all the exercise? And he said, yeah, you could do that. And then, next. And so I went off with, that was my marching orders. And I started doing like weekend meditation retreats where we do like yoga, breathe, meditate, then eat a little, then yoga, breathe, meditate, eat a little bit, sleep, that, for the weekend. Then I went away for a 2-week version of that. And I came out of that like shot out of a cannon. In my book, Body, Mind, Sport, about all this stuff, I call it jet fuel because I started competing at a much higher level. This was like back in the South Bay in LA when triathlons were really just getting started. And I started competing at a much higher level, winning medals. A lot of my friends thought I was on steroids. A lot of them learned how to meditate. But not only did I have this kind of runner's high zone thing where I felt like I was doing like less and accomplishing more. The runner's high is that my best race is my easiest race. It felt easy. But it also felt easy I was doing my clinical internship at that time, and it felt easy. Like I had a level of academic bandwidth I hadn't had in like ever. And I was like, and it lasted, this drug, whatever it was, lasted for about 3 months. And then it went, poof, disappeared. And I was like, what was that? So I started reading books on the runner's high and the zone, the psychic side of sports by Michael Murphy and other books like that. And I was just like, wanted to figure out what that was. Like it was a peak experience. So I ended up going to India as an opportunity in 1986 to study Ayurvedic medicine. Then I went there for like a 3-week-ish vacation to kind of do that. Ended up staying there a year and a half, closed my practice in Boulder, Colorado. I ended up meeting Deepak Chopra there, came back and co-directed his center for 8 years. But when I was there, I learned about nose breathing and more of this Ayurvedic principles, and I was just kind of blown away by it. And ended up doing research on and publishing studies on the difference between nose breathing and mouth breathing. And it turned out when you breathe through your nose, you activate a brainwave coherent state where the brain becomes goes into a meditative calm state of more alpha and coherence in the brain. So the brain becomes still like a lake, but you're running as fast as you can. And that's that coexistence of opposites that is a law of nature when it's manifesting its full potential. Like a galaxy has things spinning around a silent center, a solar system, an atom has electrons and protons spinning around a silent center, a hurricane, wind spinning around a silent center. When we're at our best, we feel like we're doing this absolute dynamic activity, but we're calm on the inside. Like that guy said, you're alert and resting at the same time. The two opposite systems coexisted. And we found that in our study that not only did the brain go into a meditative calm and the body was running vigorously, but the fight or flight nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, which usually are one or the other, they balanced out. We had the dynamic activity and the composure and calm nervous systems coexisting, which was okay, wow, we replicated the runner's high. That my best race is my easiest race. Billie Jean King, who did the foreword to my book, said when she would get into this state, she said, I would transport myself beyond the turmoil of the court to a place of total peace and calm. Roger Bannister, when he broke the 4-minute mile, said, I felt like I was standing still, like I was going slow, yet he was running faster than any man alive. So that experience is what Ayurveda is really about, is about realizing that when we hail from our calm center, as opposed to the winds of the storm, the stress in our life, all the incoming, and all the stimulation that we have in this culture, that we get beat up in the winds of that storm. But when we can actually start to identify that calm and create kind of a healing center, a center of self-awareness where the body can recognize health problems as problems and begin to heal, not only that, you can also, support the body with herbs and lifestyle and diet and exercise to support, the body in the stressful winds of the storm. But you also want to keep dipping the cloth in the dye of that internal experience of composure and calm. And eventually that's where you start to function from. And you start to feel like life is not such a big struggle, just like the deer or the elk in the forest. That life isn't a massive struggle for them. Once in a while you get chased by something, but generally speaking, it's pretty chill. That's how our ancestors lived, and that's not how we live. We know now today that stress is the major culprit for all aspects of metabolic syndrome: high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, extra weight around your belly, all that. And we know that when you meditate, studies show when you take the stress down, you can reverse all those. But nobody talks about that. We just give you a pill, a statin, or whatever. But we're not really looking at the elephant in the room, which is us as a culture living and dodging refrigerators and tree trunks in the winds of the storm, living life as a stressful experience versus a peaceful experience of composure and calm.
Well, within that conversation, that was beautiful. What would you say then are the main precepts for people who are not familiar at all with Ayurvedic medicine? What are the main precepts or principles that we should understand to try and begin our understanding of this type of medicine? And then within that, how do you integrate that into the Western space and ideology of our health care system?
Well, the really cool thing is what I do at Lifestyle is I write articles about this ancient medical wisdom and the modern science. And without the science, I don't feel like you can trust the ancient wisdom. But
Fair.
without the ancient wisdom, can you really trust modern science? Because I can show you study after study that coffee's good, coffee's bad, wheat's good, wheat's bad, dairy's good, dairy's bad. You name it, I'll find you studies on both sides of that aisle. But when you have something that's been around for thousands of years as a medical system and still here today, similar to Chinese medicine, and you have modern science to back it up, that's a place to look. Now, Ayurveda talked about thousands of years ago the circadian rhythms, which are now Nobel Prize winning science, that they're biological clocks, that there's certain times a day for exercise, certain times a day for eating, better times a day for sleep, better times a day for reading and thinking and being an academic. Those are our biological clocks. We only just are discovering those now. They talked about them for thousands of years. They talked about the invisible bacteria. They called them krimi, which is the microbiome, which we're just really only discovering till to this day. And they said that those bugs, there are good ones and there's bad ones. But they said, don't go killing them. You want to help deal with the bad ones by supporting the ecology, the environment inside the intestinal tract, and let the good ones fight the battle. Don't go in there with herbs to go clobber like we do with antibiotics. We're just beginning to discover that antibiotics don't work. The bugs become stronger as a result of that. So those are kind of just things that we see today that are mainstream, but they're literally originally discovered as Ayurvedic principles. The other piece of the puzzle that we're not seeing a lot of talk about, we're still ignorant in this world, is digestion. Ayurveda said that 85% of all disease comes from a digestive imbalance. Well, we have no clue about digestion and diet. The diet rules change from the best-selling book to the next best-selling book. You know what I mean? We don't really know. Should I eat a vegan diet or a carnivore diet or a high-carb diet or a low-carb, high-fat, low? We're just so confused, nobody really knows. But Ayurveda was like, this is not complicated. There are diets that are seasonal. And when you look at the harvest in the fall for the winter, that fall harvest is going to give you foods that antidote the extreme of that winter season. So it's cold and dry in the winter. What are the squirrels eating? Nuts and seeds, right? And if you were a hunter-gatherer, you'd have to eat nuts and seeds and hunt and maybe some root vegetables to store, all heavier, oilier, and higher fat, higher insulating reserve storage forms of food to help get you through the winter. But come springtime, after a long winter, what's being harvested? Not a lot. There's root vegetables. There's some bitter leafy greens, some spring greens. Our history shows that humans did most of their fastings, Lent and Ramadan, things like that, during the springtime. Why? There's no food coming out of the ground. So this is a really important time for us to go onto a low calorie, somewhat calorie restricted, and in particular, no carbohydrate time of the year. You're not harvesting any pizza or pasta during the months of spring. That doesn't happen until fall. And in fact, the Stanford studies show that the bugs in the gut in the spring with the Hadza hunter-gatherer tribe were the bugs were more prevalent with something called actinobacteria, which are bugs that get energy from fat and fiber as opposed to carbohydrates, which you get in the spring. And then in the summer, when it's hot, nature provides the antidote in the harvest for the heat, which is cooling fruits and vegetables. And towards the end of the summer, more fruits and more starches like grains and fruits. And the bugs in the end of the summer change to what are called bacteriodiets, which are really good at getting starch out of the gut into your blood. And the fuel supply changes. So, very simply, you can just go to I wrote my second book was the 3-season diet, eating with the harvest of nature. There's a spring harvest, summer harvest, and a fall harvest for winter eating. Nature's dormant in one season. And on my website, you can just go to my homepage and just type in, and you can print out the grocery lists for winter, for summer, and spring. I mean, it's really simple. You just circle the foods on the winter grocery list that you like, and just eat more of the foods off of that list. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. And now you have a list of foods from all over the world that give you the properties that you need in the fall and in the winter to antidote the cold and dryness of winter. And that's how our biological clocks stay in sync with circadian rhythms, by the microbes coming out of the soil, which change from one season to the next to the next. So that's like simple, logical, thousands of year old understanding of how to eat your food. But then there's the underlying issues with broken digestion, which we have today, where we're constantly bubble wrapping our diet. Don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat this. And that's not fixing the problem. That's actually taking the symptom away, but leaving the problem to brew,
Do we have to be thinking individualizing our diets, or is this applicable to everybody? I think one of the things that I've talked to people about, that they, when I talk about Ayurvedic medicine, I was talking to a couple of people about the upcoming interview with you, and they were like, there are these body types, right? There are 4 different body types. And that's kind of what they know about it. And I think meditation is part of sort of the Eastern culture that comes out in a conversation, Ayurvedic medicine. But do you need to individualize? Do you sort of need to see patients, or is this applicable to everybody?
It's a little bit of both. What I just described to you was everybody throughout history ate seasonally, and their diet changed dramatically from one season to the next. Everybody did that until now we have grocery stores where that's not happening at all. And in fact, now we have these extreme diets where we're doing like a low carbohydrate diet for the entire year, which is completely unnatural compared to any human or animal on this planet. So we sort of morphed ourselves into being further away from the intelligence of nature. However, what's kind of really cool about this is that those same 3 principles we talked about, the same 3 harvests, a winter and a spring and a summer harvest. Those are the 3 harvests in nature. Well, those are the 3 governing principles in nature, according to this. And Ayurveda is really nothing more than these ancient, people were so entrained with nature, they studied it in great detail. They watched the seasons change and everything happening around them, and they mapped this out. So they knew that not only does the are there these qualities in this winter. There's people who have like winter qualities. Winter's cold and dry. There's people, my mother-in-law, she's freezing all the time. And then there's people who are hot all the time, and they're constantly throwing off the covers. And there's people throwing on the covers, right? And there's people who are like spring, who hold on to more water. We all hold on to more water in the spring. The earth holds on to more water in spring. If your body type has more of those spring-like qualities, you're going to probably hold on to more water, be bigger framed, hold on to a little bit more weight, maybe be more congested, but you're also going to be calm because the earth and the water qualities make you easygoing and calm, which is why people generally like people who are, bigger and calmer and, maybe even a little bit of overweight. They're just their fat percentage might be a little bit higher, but they're easygoing and calm and they feel easy to be around. But then you have the fiery summer body types who are fiery and hot and competitive and driven and throwing pots and pans. You're like, I like you, but you're a little crazy and I want to stay away from you. But that's that heat in the body. And then, of course, there's the winter body types called Vata, which means air. And that's when the wind is blowing all the time in the winter, drying you out. And if you have a winter body type, you're going to be colder and drier, always want covers. That wind might aggravate your nervous system so you don't sleep as well. It can make you more vulnerable to stress, but it makes you super highly sensitive. So you're like the scout and you can feel, traditionally, you were the ones who could feel and sense danger. The Pitta ones were actually, building second stories on the cave, and the spring body types who were easygoing, calm, they were sitting around the fire telling stories and sharing things and creating community. And these three principles exist in nature, and people have them. And some of us have more or less than. That's why you take but we have a free body type questionnaire on our site, and you can just take that questionnaire and find, okay, how much of these do I have? And then therefore, let's say I'm a super hot, competitive driven body type. Right? I'm a hot person in a hot season, and I'm now eating a lot of acidic foods like wine and cheese and fermented food and beer and coffee was very acidic. So I'm a hot body type in a hot season, eating hot, spicy food all the time. I'm stacking that heat, and it's in the summer, which is a hot time of the year. But nature said, I didn't mean for you to do that. I give you this harvest is cooling fruits and vegetables to antidote the extreme of that season. So what happens is we should all eat with the seasons, but your body type says, hey, here's the season that I'm more vulnerable in. If I'm a cold winter Vata body type and I'm eating cold frozen smoothies in January in Vermont, right? That's like a cold person in a cold place, eating cold food, which literally doesn't exist in nature. You're going to eat, what are the squirrels eating in the winter? Nuts and seeds, warmer, heavier things, right? Fattier things to insulate you, not cold, freezing, cold things. So that body type would make sure that they're really getting kind of more medicinal dosages of the winter grocery list foods during that season. Okay. They're still going to eat in the spring. They're still going to eat in the summer, seasonal food. But because your body type says, I'm a little bit more exposed during this season, right? If I'm a Kapha spring body type holding on to earth and water more, and I'm more congested and more vulnerable to allergies and gaining weight, then the springtime is not the time for mac and cheese and pizza because it doesn't even exist at that time of the year. The springtime is the time to eat what nature provided for you, which is, a very austere, no or low carb harvest and some version of calorie restriction to force the body to burn fat, to reset fat burning, which we know our ancestors, hunter-gatherers, did thousands of years ago and still do today. They burn fat as their fuel in the spring because they eat seasonally. But that Kapha body type, man, they kind of need it a little bit more than the winter body type who's already skinny and doesn't want to lose any more weight. They don't need the calorie restriction like the bigger, heavier set Kapha type, spring body type that holds earth and water and congestion and more. So it's just a beautiful, deep understanding of nature and how you can apply what nature's doing for us to be more individualized for us. But that's like the fine tuning point, the body type part.
Okay. That flips this idea on its ear for me because I thought you needed to identify the body type and therefore you did this and therefore you did that. Have we come, just before we get into the first half of the show, have we, in your opinion, lost our intuition with ourselves? Have we walked away or been desensitized from that natural gut instinct, if you would say, towards our health?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's really good research on what gut, intuition, a gut feeling is all about. And some of that comes from, what's called interoception, which means there's receptors inside your body, just like there's receptors on your skin called proprioception, but there's receptors on the inside to feel and be more self-aware of inner signals, like the gut feeling that you just described. And, then when you look at things that actually help us listen and be more self-aware better, like I talked about, difference between going for a run and puffing and puffing through your mouth, which is like the same breath you would do if a bear was chasing you, versus doing that same exercise, breathing through your nose. Our studies that we published in the International Journal of Neuroscience actually show that when you do nose breathing, the brain goes into a meditative calm, and it goes into coherence with your respiratory rate and with your heart rhythms, and the whole body becomes in rhythm. So imagine, it's like now the whole body is starting to, function from that eye of the storm. The lake is calm. When the lake is calm, you can see what's down in the bottom. You can see the old tire tubes down there, right? And that means the body is now going to be more likely to be in resonance with interoception, so it can actually be more self-aware of those inner intuitive signals. But because we're living in the winds of the storm, most of us are like, we don't know there's danger until we get clobbered in the head with a tree trunk. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's too late.
Fair enough. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, everybody. We'll be back to continue this great conversation.
You are listening to The Health Hub here on Radio Maria Canada, a Catholic voice wherever you are. To contact us and be a part of the show, email thh@radiomaria.ca. We now continue with the program. Here once again is your host, Cathy Biase.
Welcome back to the Health Hub. My guest today is Dr. John Douillard, and we're going to continue on this great journey talking about Ayurvedic medicine. Dr. John, my question, at the beginning of the show, I said we're going to talk about longevity, but, through the back door, we really have interweaved this whole idea of gut health, digestion, diet. So we're seeing a picture here of longevity. An interesting piece that is central, I would say, to Ayurvedic medicine is this whole idea of meditation, and with that comes breath work. And then digging deeper down is this whole idea or this whole concept that we don't use our diaphragm enough. Can you get into that and really give us some strong insight into those areas?
Yeah, a really great question. In Ayurveda, there's 8 branches, and one of those branches of Ayurveda is specifically geared towards longevity, right? Which is really cool. And what you just described was what's in that branch. So they understood longevity to be the study of the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is the largest circulatory system in the body, and it's trying to do 3 basic things. 1, take out the trash. Number 2, deliver fat as baseline energy to every cell of your body. And number 3, carry your immune system. Okay? So, turns out that the lymphatic system, being the largest circulatory system in our body, we don't really have a lot of radar on that in Western medicine. We only hear about it when someone gets cancer and they cut lymph nodes out. But Ayurveda said, this is the drainage system, the immune carrying system. This is the system. If it's broken, you can't get the trash out. You can't detoxify. You can't carry your immune system. You can't deliver energy. You're in trouble. And that's the link to longevity, right? So that's what their whole branch of longevity was about. Well, guess what? The number one, because you probably know that the lymphatic system is not pumped by your heart. Your heart pumps blood into your arteries and carries the blood back through your veins. But the lymph system carries right along next to those arteries and veins, but it doesn't actually be pumped by your heart. It's pumped by muscular contractions, pumped by movement, and it's pumped specifically by your diaphragm. The number one pump to get all the trash out, carry your immune system, deliver energy is your diaphragm. And in a very recent study, that with elite athletes, 91% of them did not have a diaphragm relaxing and contracting fully, which is bad. So every time that we get stressed out, we change how we breathe a little bit, right? And then that becomes normal over time. And then another stressful situation comes and we take another breath and that becomes normal over time. Next thing you know, we are breathing so completely different than we did when we were a baby. You know, when you watch your baby breathe, their belly is going out and out to the side and out. The belly is getting big. When you see a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old breathe, they're all in their upper chest, right? The rib cage has one job in life: squeeze air out. And it becomes a cage over time. The diaphragm has one job: contract, suck air into this cage, and open the rib cage like a balloon. Well, over time, stress wins, the rib cage gets tight, diaphragm becomes weak, and we lose the pump of the lymphatic system, right? So this is why it's so important for us to strengthen our diaphragm. Studies show, and this is crazy, but studies show that if you strengthen your diaphragm, in Western medicine would call these diaphragmatic breathing exercises maximum inspiratory breathing techniques. In Ayurveda, they called it pranayam. Prana means breath, yam means to pause, hold, or extend your breath. So it was all breath work, but basically slowing down the breath or pausing the breath. This was kind of the critical piece, right? So studies show that when you first strengthen the diaphragm, obviously, if it's really strong and elastic at the same time, you can fully contract and fully relax it, then it's going to naturally slow down. You don't need to pump it so many times to get, the work done. It's going to be slower and deeper and more efficient. So studies show when you do it that way, it's called maximum inspiratory breathing, you can actually reverse your heartburn, GERD, reflux, and indigestion. There's about 14 studies in the medical journals that say if you have heartburn, you can reverse that with your strengthening your diaphragm. Now you go to your doctor, they don't tell you, no one's going to tell you to breathe away your heartburn, but in their medical journals, there is study after study after study saying it does that. Studies show that you can, with strengthening your diaphragm, you can lower your blood pressure in 3 minutes as good as a Western medication. There is no doctor going to tell you to do that, but it's in the medical journals. The diaphragm is the pump of the brain's cerebral spinal fluid, right? We all know we have fluid that pumps up and down our spine into our brain. It's like a brainwashing fluid. It's called cerebral spinal fluid. The pump for that is your diaphragm. If you have an issue with that, like in COVID, for example, you can't breathe, so you can't pump that cerebral spinal fluid. Well, when long-haul COVID was first discovered, studies early on said this was caused by congestion of the brain's lymphatic and what's called the glymphatic systems, two systems of getting the trash out of your head via the cerebral spinal fluid. So it makes sense that when you have poor diaphragmatic function, like in COVID, you're not going to get the trash out of your head. Well, recent studies discovered the brain lymphatic systems, and that dumps, according to the research, 3 pounds of trash and plaque out of your head, your brain, every year while you sleep. And they discovered that about 20 years ago. And since then, they've been doing massive research digging into this new lymphatic drainage system for the brain. And they've now linked congestion of that system, which is directly caused by poor diaphragmatic function, to, you ready? Anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, inflammation, infection, and autoimmune concerns. So all of a sudden, the diaphragm becomes like, and it's nobody's talking about it, the most critical piece of our longevity and health puzzle. It pumps your lymph. Studies show that women with breast cancer have more congestion of the anterior diaphragmatic lymph nodes. And that diaphragm's job is to pump that. But if it's not pumping, you can't get the trash out of your chest, out of your breast. You can't get the waste out of your belly. So you store extra weight around your belly and hips, which is where the lion's share of the lymphatic vessels are. And of course, you get congestion in the brain. So you start being like tired and lethargic, and your brain fog and things like that begin to happen. And this was all not supposed to happen. But over time, when the rib cage gets tight, diaphragm gets weak, you lose that pump and you start getting age-related cognitive decline and degeneration. That wouldn't happen if the trash removal system was working for you.
I had to go some physiotherapy for something a bit back, and my physiotherapist, as with our conversation here, seems to be a little bit ahead of the curve. She said, I need you to tap into your diaphragm. I was at a loss. I was like, okay, what does that even mean? She goes, I want you to put your hands on either side of your ribs and feel them moving when you breathe. That exercise, it took me about 2 minutes to try and figure out like just the movement of my ribs. I have to imagine that people listening are thinking, how do I even begin to work on the health of my diaphragm? What are the first few steps that will indicate to me that I'm going in the right direction? Is there any tips you can help us out with that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I've written so many articles at lifespot.com. There's one called The Best Diaphragmatic Breathing Exercise. All those are like 1,500 articles. They're all free. And there's one called Lateral Breathing. And I think what your friend or your physiotherapist was showing you was how to put your hands on the side of the rib cage and actually breathe laterally. In other words, breathe into your side. So what you can do is we can do this. Just listen to me carefully. Maybe just close your eyes, and if you're listening, and just breathe in. And now we're going to breathe into our belly and our lower sides of our ribs. We're not going to go into our chest. So we're not going to breathe up. We're going to breathe low and wide. Okay. So let's breathe in through our nose slowly and fill your belly a little bit. But instead of now breathing into your chest and moving your chest, try to keep the air low and wide and push the air out the side of your rib cage. And you'll feel pressure on the side of your rib cage as you do that. And as you keep sipping the air in through your nose, little sips when you get to the top, you'll feel the pressure building up like you're pumping air in a basketball in the sides of your rib cage. If you keep sipping air into that maximum inspiratory breathing technique, you'll feel pressure in your lower back because your diaphragm is contracting now all the way down into your lower lumbar spine. So now you keep sipping to get to that maximum level, feel the pressure on your rib cage, on the side, on your back. And then as you breathe out, you narrow the rib cage all the way, contract your abdomen all the way. You want a full exhalation because that's exhalation when the diaphragm is fully relaxing. And when it fully relaxes, the diaphragm is trying to parachute up under the rib cage. And because the rib cage is so contracted and so rigid for most of us, there's no room anymore for the diaphragm to fully parachute up under the rib cage to fully relax and then fully exhale. So what happens is because we don't fully exhale, diaphragm doesn't fully relax, we don't get rid of what's called the dead air space. So we never get rid of all the air, so we really can't take all the new air in. So we start breathing very compromised. So this lateral breathing is like if you watch your dog breathe, or a horse breathe, or your baby breathe, or your young children breathe. The rib cage is going out to the side. We are the ones as adults breathe up and down, belly, chest, upper chest, belly, chest, upper chest. But this exercise is about creating lateral excursion, making the rib cage more elastic, going wide and going out to the side, and then creating a full exhalation, which creates a full diaphragmatic relaxation, which in that study I mentioned, 91% of athletes did not have a diaphragm fully relaxing and fully contracting. And this is the point. So this is a very simple exercise. And what I love doing this one, I do it in bed. Like I wake up in the morning, I roll on my back, and I just feel my belly a little bit. Don't go up into my chest. Just push out the air out to my side of my ribs, low and wide, and breathe in and sip a little air in to make it feel that pressure pushing out to the side. And then I breathe out, narrow the rib cage, and then take a long, slow, and deep full exhale, contract that abdomen and get rid of all the air. And these breaths are long, slow, deep, but maximal. That's the key. And that's an easy way to get started. There's many, many more exercises for your diaphragm to create elasticity that are so critically important because nobody talks about how the rib cage over time just gets tighter and tighter, and we start shallow breathing. And as you get older, you start opening your mouth more, and you lose that respiratory efficiency for sure.
Well, what area of Western medicine takes responsibility for the diaphragm?
Well, pulmonologists are supposed to. Unfortunately, when I wrote my book, Body, Mind, Sport, I interviewed many pulmonologists, many, and still today, unfortunately, most of them are going to say, there's no difference between nose and mouth breathing. Yeah, there's no difference. But, the reality is that's not true. And the science now really does prove it. I published studies on it. There's many studies now that are, my book came out in the early 1990s. So a long time ago about nose breathing and the research on it. Now there's been so much since then. But there was a really cool opera singer doctor in New York who did breath training with opera singers and so on. And then he started working with kids who had breathing issues. And then he got recruited to work with the 1964 Olympic team in Squaw Valley because they were doing the Mexico City Olympics, which was the first altitude Olympics. And he taught them all how to breathe. And the key was for him at that point was to learn how to exhale. Like I just said, if you don't exhale, you don't get the air out. And you get the new air in, you're really inefficient. And the rib cage is so tight that there's no room for a full exhalation. So he taught them how to do it. I don't know if you remember the 1964 Olympics. You're probably not old enough, but there was when Lee Evans and his guy, they all won gold medals, and they had the black glove on. They had their hands up, and it was kind of a rebellion, against, human rights and all that. So it was remembered for that. But when Lee Evans won that gold medal, and they won more gold medals in that Olympics than ever before, he said the whole time he was winning his gold medal, he was just thinking, exhale, exhale, exhale. So it was all about getting a full exhalation. And that's one of the things that he learned. So there's so many stories about when you really learn how to breathe and antidote and combat this tendency for life to create a stressful upper chest fight or flight breathing response 26,000 times per day. That's how many times we breathe. And if every one of those is a fight or flight response, because the upper chest is full of fight or flight receptors. Get up a tree, save your life because there's a bear chasing you. The lower lobes are full of parasympathetic, rebuild, rejuvenate receptors. So if you don't breathe down there, over time, the stress will win the war. And we know that's linked to so much of the age-related decline that we have.
And how much time do we need to designate to doing this for it to become quasi-natural?
I went into a restaurant about a year or so ago, and as I was going in, there was a couple of elderly folks, about 3 or 4 of them coming out, and they were very frail, 80s or 90s. Their mouth was open, and they're having a real hard time struggling getting out of the restaurant. And I was like helping them, but I was like so frustrated because their mouths were wide open. They were huffing and puffing. And I looked at them and I said, if someone would have just told them, if they would just do 5 minutes a day of the breathing technique I just shared with you, just that simple thing, get that lateral breathing working, to take this slow maximal breathing, it would reverse their heartburn, GERD, reflux, indigestion. It would actually lower their blood pressure. It would pump their cerebrospinal fluid into their brain and take the 3 pounds of trash out of their head. So it would prevent them from the age-related cognitive decline. It would pump their whole lymphatic system so their body would get the trash out. So they wouldn't have all these joint problems where the joints become inflamed because of compromised trash removal. So all these things really happen very simply. So just 5 minutes of that, maybe a little bit more would be great. In the beginning, I think is work. There's the best diaphragmatic breathing exercise video. It's got 3 videos completely different than what I just saw you. Those would be really cool to get the rib cage moving and the diaphragm moving independently of each other. That's kind of really the key, is the rib cage and the diaphragm get stuck together and becomes one big rib cage. And when that becomes rigid, well, it's the beginning of the end. We slowly lose our ability to breathe and have good lymphatic function.
One thing that happened to me when I started to do this was I got a little bit lightheaded. Is that common?
Very. In the beginning, you're going to get a little bit lightheaded, which is why I say you should always do these breathing techniques in the beginning long, slow, deep, and maximal, and always through the nose. Because if you do it fast, it can create so much dizziness you could maybe even fall over. But if you do it really slow, it activates the calm receptor, the repair receptors in the lower lobes of your lungs. So you actually don't get as much of that dizziness. But usually people in the first week of breathing exercises, that dizziness goes right away.
There. Do you see people as a practitioner, or are you in the research side? You do.
I do. I've been in practice for 41 years, and I cut my practice down to do, of course, more writing research, but I still do see patients for sure.
In person, or do you do outside?
I do them on Zoom, actually. Since COVID, we closed our clinic, and now I'm pretty much only remote. So all my consults are remote, so anybody can come from anywhere.
Wonderful. So if someone wanted to touch base with you, perhaps make an appointment, read about everything that you're doing, where would they look?
You can go to just lifespa.com. That's LIFESPA.com. And right on the homepage, there's a little button. There's a big kind of a banner that says New Here, Start Here. So click that button that says New Here, Start Here. You can get the grocery list that I mentioned. You can learn all about the breathing techniques, all the really important, learn your body type. All that important stuff is on that one button. Just click on that one button, that'll take you where you need to go.
Wonderful. And if there's one practice of the Ayurvedic tradition that you would say, start here, this is going to be impactful, what would that be?
Well, in addition to the breathing we just talked about, so let me give you that one first. But the second one, I think I spent the first 20 years of my life telling people to stop, relax, and eat their bigger meal in the middle of the day. And this is the circadian rhythm backed by science understanding. The digestive strength is stronger in the middle of the day. This is why every farmer on the planet, everywhere on the planet, ate their biggest meal in the middle of the day. That's true in Europe still, in Asia still, but not here. But that's the time when the body can digest the food. Why? Because the next circadian clock that becomes active at that time is your nervous system, which is your brain wants to feed off all the food you just ate. You just filled it up with gas. Now I'm going to use it, right? But if you're eating on the run or gobbling food or in front of your computer, go, or not even having a lunch, then the brain becomes active between 2 and 6 in the afternoon, according to biological clock science. And it's like, where's my fuel? And it's like, your body's like, well, we had a salad in front of my computer. It's like, that's all we had. I don't want to gain weight. And so the brain has to struggle to get its fuel, and that creates emergency stress. And that will cause, depending whether you're genetically predisposed to get high blood pressure, high blood sugar. But if you're having that crash in the afternoon where you feel tired or lethargic or need a little snack or a little chocolate or a little bit of coffee or a little bit of something to stimulate you to get you out of that slump because you're feeling tired between 2 and 6 in the afternoon, then your life is an emergency. Every single day you're having to dig out of that hole, which is why historically people ate in a long, slow, relaxed way, biggest meal in the middle of the day, so you had smooth energy into the afternoon. I know it's not our culture, but the best you can, make that lunch count, make it relax, and then the critical piece at the end of that meal, after you finish it in a relaxed way, go for a walk. The critical piece of the puzzle is get that food moving through your arteries as quickly as possible. Otherwise, it does much more damage. There's a lot of science behind that. I've written an article about that. It's an old Ayurvedic thing. Is called Shata Pravali, which means take a walk after your meals. That was an Ayurvedic concept for thousands of years. You don't just eat and then go sit down and watch a movie, not that they did that thousands of years ago, but we do that now. We sit on the couch, eat a meal, go sit on the couch and just sit there. That's like the worst thing we can do. So big lunch, and then, or if you have a dinner, just make sure you march in front of the TV with the clicker in your hand for at least 15 minutes before you sit down, and then you're going to be good to go.
Just in our conversation here, you seem to have made life so easy by following a few principles. I think that is something that we do terribly wrong in this part of the world, is we make our health extremely complicated, which in and of itself adds a stress to our life. So I really appreciate everything that you say, and I really thank you for being on the show today. It was enlightening.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
Everybody, we'll talk to you next week on The Health Hub.
You have been listening to The Health Hub, hosted by Cathy Biase, here on Radio Maria Canada.